Hey guys, now we're going to move on to the second section of Wolf's essay. We're going to start looking at what meaningfulness has to do with reasons for love, okay? So our overall goal is that we're going to explore what meaningfulness is and how it relates to reasons for love, coming from Wolf's point of view, okay? When I write these goals, we might be thinking about what we're doing or what the teacher's trying to do, but really we're just trying to explore where Wolf is coming from her point of view, okay? Which means we do the usual stuff. We name and define key terms. And then we explore the characteristics of what meaningfulness is. In other words, their bits, their components, and their relation to reasons of love, which is that additional reference point, we could say, for moral description and moral prescription. And then we're moving on to look at the relationship between the subjective and objective components of meaningful living. So after exploring the subjective and objective components of living a meaningful life, we're going to develop a new area for inquiry. Well, we're not really going to develop a new area of inquiry. We're just going to look at a new area of inquiry, or think about a new area of inquiry that has been suggested by Suzanne Wolf, which she explores in her next section. Okay? So can you please write down all of these success criteria for me? Pretty please with the cherry on top. And then can you move on to your ABK? And again, it's all about the second type of thing that could be loved. You can have love in terms of interpersonal relationships, but you can also have a passion. You can do something simply because of a reason for love, and that could be a hobby. So I'd like you to draw an image that represents a hobby that you have. Thank you. Okay, so in this section, Wolf starts teasing out what meaning is. What is a meaningful life? Well, you can only really answer that question if you understand what people mean when they refer to the term meaning, okay? Now, I just want to touch on this, though it's not in this section. You might want to take some notes. Wolf uses what's called the endoxic approach, and we'll look at that a bit later in some other sections. It's very similar to something that Aristotle used, and it was that we take a set of intuitions or things gained from experience, and we use them as reference points for building a philosophy. And it's only when these reference points produce conclusions or ideas that conflict with each other that we start re-evaluating these reference points. And that's really important. We're looking at things gleaned from experience and building on top of them. However, we're not looking for that kind of Cartesian absolute foundation stone using that kind of deductive logic. So just keep that in mind. That's why when we go on to have a look at the way Wolf reasons, so the first thing she does is she looks at what people mean, or what do we mean socially when we actually refer to meaning, okay? So she wants to consider the characteristics of meaning, and the way that she does that is she looks at the context through which people actually use the word meaningful, okay? And what she notes is that it's not really all that clear when we explore the social conception or the contextual understanding of meaningfulness in many different contexts, okay? So she then says, look, instead of looking for a fixed or nailed down definition, we're going to try and have a look at the meaning of the word in a different way. I'm just going to press pause and get you to record a note, okay? Okay, so hopefully you've taken a note about the fact that she believes that a fixed definition is unclear. It's really hard to pinpoint what people mean when they use the word meaningful. So she comes up with a replacement, and she basically argues that, look, when we talk about meaning, right, we're talking about something that we love to do and something that is worthy of doing. And I just want you to know, whenever I put Wayne's World up here with the "we're not worthy" meme, I'm putting a cross there to show that it's a double negation, okay? It means that it has to be worthy. Something you love doing and something that's worthy, right? Something that you love doing with reference to a particular object, an external object. So take a note. So anything meaningful could be rephrased again. You might want to take this down as a note again, as a kind of loving reaction or a loving interaction with the worthy object, all right? And it has to be done in a positive way. In other words, a way that builds on your life in a positive way, and maybe also affirms the value or the positiveness of that particular object itself. So let me just be really clear. Instead of, it also adds to you and adds to your life in a constructive and positive way, but it also signifies the action, and what you do with it signifies that it has value, that it has worth. It gives it more meaning as well, okay? Take a note. So as soon as we come up with this conclusion, we find that Wolf has identified a problem. In that the solutions or the answer, the definition that she just gave seems to be quite exact. It has this kind of like false or illusion of specificity. It's quite specific, but it's not. It's actually much more broad than it appears to be in that answer. And she also says, look, in other ways too, the answer that I gave points to terms or to ideas that are actually quite vague or diffuse, which is why I've circled the diffuse section here on the target. So we need to further explore what it means to live a meaningful life, or more importantly, explore what meaning is. So she does that. She further inspects the definition of meaning, and she further inspects the definition of love as well, because she feels like she needs to further pinpoint what that actually is, okay? Or reasons for love in general. So take a note. Now she says that if you love something, that requires a feeling towards an object, a genuine positive feeling or a way that you actually act for something. So if you do something out of reasons for love, right, you do that out of a feeling towards that particular object of your love. Take a note. Then she invites us to consider what that actually means. And she says, well, look, if we do that, then, right, that means that any kind of meaningful interaction we have out of reasons for love requires two components. One is subjective and the other is objective. When I'm talking about objective, because it's supposed to be kind of a way of understanding metaphysics or reality, and literally positing that there is some kind of truth outside of ourselves. It's not just a mental construction. I'm going to have this guy outside the aeroplane, because he should be inside it. It just really brings home that idea of what objectivity is, okay? So, first thing that she says is when she talks about subjectivity, she talks about the fact that really that's when we consider something and the relationship that it has for us in our own lives. That's when she says something is meaningful. Something is meaningful and we do it out of reasons for love. Take a note. When we look at, and when we do that, we have a subjective kind of understanding of its relationship and its value with regards to our own lives, okay? Alright, get rid of value. Don't put value in there because value will confuse things a bit more, okay? Basically, we understand its relationship to our own lives. Okay? But when we look at the objective component of what meaning is, right, what it means to live a meaningful life, and more importantly, again, this relates to the idea of reasons for love, what we're effectively saying is that we're looking at we're looking at a concept of worth. It is objectively worthy from her point of view, okay? Take a note. Now, to further understand what this means by the concept of worthy, because it's still a pretty vague term, let's just try and say that we can kind of understand it by thinking about the worth of other people. What would we say that is that allows us to describe how other people have worth? And more importantly, when we look at examples like people who have lived really meaningful, good lives, we might want to also consider what worth is, because what made their lives more worthy, what made their lives more valuable, okay? Take a note. Alright. Now, when she says we look at these 2 points, she says the second one, the objective criteria, is a really vital an important piece of the puzzle, this idea of worthy. And the way that she does that is she gets us to look at certain examples. I'm only going to quote one. I think the chocolate cake one's a better one, but I want to just do the first one because you can do the chocolate cake while we're reading. So if you were to smoke pot all your life, you might find that enjoyable. You might have an understanding of how that's going to bring joy and have some kind of, not reference point, but it's just going to understand the reaction or the interaction that it has with you for your own personal life and your own life, right? So you'll find joy in it. It will be a fun activity. We also know it could be a destructive activity. I'm not condoning it, but I'm just saying smoking pot, you can find joy in it, right? But that doesn't mean that it's worthy. Take a note. All right, so this is why worthiness is an important criterion for meaning. And it's also an important criterion for meaning in terms of not like what is the word meaning, but meaning in terms of living a fulfilling life. That's what Suzanne Wolf means when she talks about meaning, okay? And again, meaning, when we do things as reasons for love, we're doing them because they give our lives meaning. That's the relationship. So reasons for love involve doing meaningful things for us. Just take a note. But meaning requires some kind of worthiness, all right? Which, from her point of view, it means to engage with the object and to engage with the object of your love, be it the person or be it the hobby, in a way that actively it affirms it, that says this is a positive thing. That's something that you really want to, it's something you should really pay attention to. Take a note. Then Susan Wolf says, look, we can further explore the idea of what meaning is, or these ideas of meaning that I've brought up previously, by looking at a kind of synthesis of two commonly held ideas about living, or views we have on how to live a good life, okay? And she says, look, it tends to be that when you talk to people, it's about doing what you love, which she relates to the subjective component, which is about, having an understanding about remember the subjective component, as I defined before, is about having an understanding about what you find in it, the joy you find in it, right? The intrinsic joy you have in doing the action, okay? So that's the first component. She says doing what you love relates to the claims that you should do what you love relates to this previous criteria I have about the subjective nature of doing things for reasons for love, or finding meaning by doing things for reasons for love, okay? But she also says there is this commonly held belief that reflects the objective component, which is the call from something outside of yourself to do something, to do good, right? So do I participate in community? Do I do something because from a Kantian point of view it's morally right? Do I follow a religion? By participating in something larger than yourself, something independent of yourself, you're effectively finding another avenue into understanding how to live a good life. And that's what all the stuff is referred to before. So this is where worth comes in, right? She believes that the objective criteria of finding something positively worthy, and that's external to you, and positively engaging with the object in a way that affirms its value as a meaningful thing, right? That's like being called by something outside, right? You do the hobby because the hobby calls you. You also do the hobby because you enjoy doing the hobby. The subjective component would be do the hobby because you enjoy the hobby. The external or objective component would be you do the hobby because the hobby calls you to it. Take a note. Now, quite rightly, you would totally expect this, right? The objective component is about worth. And she literally says this, right? The value is determined by reference to the independent point of view that the object has. So, like for instance, if I'm a gardener, it's the garden itself that you're working on, right? That has the value, that has the source of value and creates the meaning. So she is a values theorist, a lot like Aristotle, whose value is to accrue eudaimonia, or Socrates, whose value is to accrue the good, okay? So keep that in mind. Take a note. And she says the problem is that the way I've been looking at everything yet again is missing another piece of the puzzle, which I have to elaborate on a later part of the essay. I need to take the two commonly held views and find the third one that fits the gap, that deals with the lacking conception or idea we have of living a meaningful life so far. Okay, so take some notes. All right, so what have we dealt with today? Well, we've named, defined, and interrelated key terms. We definitely have. We've explored the characteristics of meaningfulness and the relationships to reasons of love, because we've tried to point out that reasons of love end up meaning that you engage in meaningful activity. Reasons of love are related to doing things meaningful that contribute to meaningfulness in your life. We've looked at the subjective component of how something can be meaningful. It pretty much provides you with joy or fulfillment, something kind of inner. And it's really about your relationship, your interpersonal relationship with the particular object, okay? And then we've looked at the objective component, which is all about that idea of worth and value, that there needs to be something, the object needs to be worthy in order to engage with it. And you need to engage with that action positively in a way that affirms the object as a positive thing to do. So that's why smoking pot just doesn't cut it. It's not a positive kind of contribution to, it's not a positive thing to do, right? And we looked at the fact that she believes that something's missing when you try and look at the objective and subjective component, which, to sum it up, basically, remember the subjective is about your internal relationship with the object, your internal motivation or drive towards it, and then the external component is the worth that it has that's objectively defined. Well, she thinks that when you look at them, you relate those two to two commonly held beliefs. The subjective component is you do what you do for love, which of course would relate because you're doing it for your internal relationship with it. And then, of course, the objective component is is about being called by something outside of you, something bigger than yourself, right? And something is missing. So that's why the success criteria is basically pointing to the fact that in the next section, she wants to explore that missing characteristic, that missing thing that she thinks she misses in explaining how one could live a good life, a meaningful life based on reasons for love. Cheers.